Hey everybody.
We're going to talk about abilities. First question. So for Arete for athletics, you'd figure that a hellacious amount of Arete for athletics would help derive stats like lifting or dodge DV, but as written it seems like they don't. Why is that? Well, mostly because that would be super overpowered and Greeks would rule the world.
Yeah, it'd be like Greeks just get a DV bonus. And then do they also get like, why a DV bonus but not somehow a stand bonus? Like,
yeah, it's partly because derived stats aren't universal. Like John says, like soak's not from a derived stat, but DV is, so why does this affect DV but not soak? You know, if you have a million Arete fortitude, that doesn't affect your soak, so that's weird because the systems are different there. Also because having plus a million DV is very powerful. Dex and DV are already really powerful in the system, and that would just make Greeks like kings of everything all the time, which we don't want.
yeah.
I mean, we want them to be cool. We don't want them to.
Also, there's just enough dice adders throughout the system. I guess like you could say no dice adders count except Arete, but it's probably just better to be like only Arete counts.
Exactly, because all the other dice adders don't count. You know, animal aspect doesn't add to your DV. Animal aspect for strength doesn't add to your lifting. All of those things that, or you know, faunophagia isn't going to add to that.
And then
stars doesn't add to those.
Do the Tuatha add to that for some reason? Like
from their skill gauge, because it's the same thing. They just get some dice to it, but it's not quite the same thing because Aretes are like dots of Arete. But the idea that extra dots shouldn't affect those derived stats is mostly to keep the game balanced so that certain pantheons aren't just automatically winning at stuff.
Yeah.
And we do try to make it so that Arete doesn't get left out in the cold all the time. Like there are several boons where we go, okay, or knacks where we go. Normally we would say Arete doesn't apply to this, but if you want to pay a little extra legend, Arete can apply to this. Things like, and the crowd goes wild, which makes things into autos, normally doesn't apply to Arete, but you can pay to make it apply to Arete. And in that way you can say, okay, you get to use your Arete for some stuff, even though it would be overpowered normally because you pay for it. But with something like DV that's on all the time, like there's no good time for us to say, pay for that to add it to your DV, and it would still be overpowered if you could pay for it to add it to your DV.
But you can't add it to your roll with it. Not your roll with it, your defensive do-over.
Yes, you can add it to your defensive do-over. Which is very useful. Goes will tell you that saved him many times.
Right. So, you know, it's which is kind of a defensive DV type thing. It's not really DV, it's soak, but it's the same idea. And I think that's enough. Like, you don't need to double dip on that. And mostly it's just game balance.
Yeah.
Because Arete is amazing. I've never had anyone be like, God,
I wish I didn't have Arete.
I wish I had a good
something
PSP.
Yeah. I mean, people want to try all the PSPs, but Arete is pretty universally recognized as super goddamn useful. So, yeah, I mean, I get what you're coming from in the case of, like, it's weird that I have 10 dots of super Arete or super athletics, but that doesn't apply to making me better at lifting stuff. But mostly that's because...
No, stop. It does make you better at lifting stuff. Hey, we had a slight break talking about whether or not Arete adds to lifting. And we've always played that it should. We understand that was a little bit before, I think we made the lifting table. And then we haven't really had Greeks since then, so it hasn't come up.
At least not Greeks that really lifted anything.
So Arete should add to lifting.
I guess it's...
Very directly, that's exactly what Arete Athletics is.
Yeah, I think it's... We've in the past said Arete never adds to derived values, but since we made things like perception and lifting derived values, those things it should add to.
Yeah, I guess so that was the change. Since we stopped playing Greeks, we made those into derived values where they weren't before.
Right, and so... We're sorry, we've been confusing in our terminology.
Yeah, so just Arete doesn't add to DV.
Pretty much just DV. I mean, if there's something else that seems like this is weird, that it's becoming too good, check with your ST or ask us about it.
Yeah, but again, we haven't had high-level Greeks in so long that we aren't sure.
Yeah.
We know that DV is broken, and I know that it was good when it was athletics. I think our athletics 2 lifting. That's
right.
cool.
Yeah, because, you know, you should be able to lift more because you're amazing in athletics.
Yeah.
And we used to do that with that. Actually, we had a Greek that did that because Goes could lift, like, stupid amounts of stuff, even though he wasn't very strong, because he had all the Arete athletics. And so, obviously, we do want you to use that. So, factor it in with the table. When you start getting past the point where the table runs out of numbers for you.
Well, that's another reason is the table is made to go higher than the highest person could get because of Arete.
Exactly. Like, nobody can normally get 60 with their normal strength athletic stats. Actually, 60 is there for people with Arete. So, yes. So we forgot to tell you that you should be counting Arete, but we made the table to include Arete.
So there you go.
Right. But DV, no, because it's busted. So we know you choose Epic Strength and maybe Mystery for Herakles' associated stats, but what would you choose for his 6 abilities?
I could have sworn we've done this before. I'm certain we have.
You think so?
Yeah. But it's in a blog post somewhere. So
Brawl.
in the blog post we're right, and here we may be wrong. Brawl, fortitude, melee.
Yeah, definitely all those things. I want to say
Athletics.
yes, athletics, obviously. Like, just give him all the fighting stats. He also does shooting of arrows and probably has
And throwing.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's pretty much it. Just give him all of the
I'm 80% sure sans command those are areas. So.
Yeah, probably. I want to say cult because he has a mystery cult, but frankly, he's an idiot at occult things, and he doesn't know how centaurs work or what anything is going on when he's on his quests for the labors. So probably he doesn't actually have that. That's just something his mortal cult does. So yeah, combat stats, easy. The things that you would expect Herakles to have.
Yeah. Cool.
Can you explain the uses of politics and integrity other than your resist roll? I've always had trouble defining them.
Integrity, not a whole lot. I use a few things. I have some monsters just let you resist with a strength integrity or a stamina integrity. Like I throw integrity around. It's always a resist stat. It's much like your fortitude.
Integrity is basically fortitude of the spirit. It's your strength of will of yourself to say I'm going to be me, not whatever something else is trying to make me do. Doing
willpower, integrity, legend for everything's boring. So sometimes I just have some random powers do X and integrity, or X and fortitude, or X and athletics. Like I tend to mix them up a lot.
And once in a while, you use it as something to like enforce integrity or recognize integrity. Like the justice purview will roll like perception integrity stuff, which is mostly about recognizing strength of will in other people, or enforcing strength of will on other people as like punishments or justice things. So it's something that most of the time is going to be like your fortitude. So you're going to use it in any case where you would use fortitude if it was physical, you would use integrity if it's not physical. But other than that, it doesn't do a lot. The same way fortitude doesn't. You're going to roll fortitude when stuff comes up for it. And that's
it's a great thing to use in the when you're in the underworld, like to resist against stuff, or to like just roll maybe by itself for things.
Yeah, definitely stuff that like affects your virtues might bring integrity into play. All that kind of stuff.
Politics you should be using all the time.
Politics. I think we actually did a regular blog post about politics at some point, so that's in there, and I'll try and find it and link it. But politics is going to be interacting with people in any setting that is going to be political. So
right. So it's not any hierarchy of structure of people, anything military.
Yeah, military, business, actual politics. If you have any group of gods that's more than like 2 or 3, then you need politics to be dealing with them.
Yeah, I guess so. If you think of empathy as being able to notice an individual's emotions and how to interact with those and how to read those. Politics is the same for a group of people.
Yeah, empathy is your one-on-one social interaction stat, and politics is kind of like you're reading the room, you're affecting the room kind of a stat. More than the normal like presence, obviously, but that's just like being there. Politics is being active. And
recently in the gangs game, I had usually politics is used with another stat as well. So Zoe gave a big speech to Congress, and at the beginning I was like, all right, roll a charisma presence that's going to be your likability throughout the speech. But then during the speech, when she started talking about some law stuff and trying to figure out how to play the room a little bit, then it was a charisma politics. So even though the charisma politics was layered on a charisma presence, the politics part ended up being very important as well.
And there may be times when something is specifically like deep politics, like law or interaction between countries or important people, you may want to use like intelligence politics instead of academics, just because it's a specialized area. Like, if you ever look at something, I think previously people have said to me, why would I use politics when I could use like empathy or presence or something like that? And my answer is always, because if it's politics, if you're actually doing politics, that's the stat you should use. Yeah, you could probably use those other things, but they won't work as well because you aren't going to have like this, I have this politics thing. So normally, like, we would say roll politics, and if someone said, could I roll empathy instead, we'd say maybe, but you get like a -8 penalty to it or something because you're not actually good at politics.
You're not actually good at the politicking part.
Right. We also use politics for things that involve understanding structure and plan that way. Like, for example, finding your way in the wilderness is a survival role, but finding your way in the city is a politics role. I would say roll politics, roll wits politics to try to find your way around an unfamiliar city.
Right, like I don't really know... I don't know the city specifically, but I have enough politics to know how one would properly construct a city.
Yeah,
so
I can, say, I know kind of maybe some similar structures and things. I would see what would the bureaucracy of this city build it like, and then kind of figure it out from there. So politics is an all-the-time kind of a thing. So we use that one actually a whole lot for like everybody.
I would say the modern games probably use it a little more.
That's true. The not like the 19th century games, there's a lot more like Frontier where politics doesn't really apply, but even so, like it comes out. Scion is the only White Wolf system that doesn't have a subterfuge ability. Does that bother you guys? Because I hate it.
Why?
Specifically, this person hates using empathy for lying instead of subterfuge.
Why?
I've seen a lot of arguments about this on the forums back in the day, and usually the person arguing says, well, empathy should just be a perception stat, but it shouldn't actually do anything active. So when we say, well, you use empathy because it's your ability to understand people and relate to them, they're saying, well, that shouldn't actually do anything. That's just like...
So I could see a system where that worked, in that every attribute had 4 stats that went with, 4 abilities that went with it, and those stayed with only those abilities.
Right.
So if you had, if empathy could only be in one of the categories, you could have perception, empathy, manipulation, subterfuge. But what's great about the most White Wolf systems, like this one doesn't have subterfuge, but the same D10 dice pool idea applies, where any ability can go with any attribute.
Yeah.
And so you want something that is more general to spread around so that it works with all the attributes.
Yeah, we actually have a problem with some of the things that are more specialized, like, for example, larceny. People don't actually pick those up or don't use them as much, or STs don't have a harder time saying, when do I ask them to roll larceny, because it's more of a specialized stat, versus something like empathy, because it is a little bit more generalized, can be used for a lot of things and interpreted in a lot of different ways. And I know there are some people who don't like the idea that we say, well, you use empathy for lying, because empathy is, if you don't have empathy, you can't possibly understand the other person well enough to lie to them. But that is a true thing. Like, would you like us to... It makes me think that if you did have a subterfuge ability, like, you'd always have to roll empathy first to see if you actually understood what anything was going on, and then roll subterfuge to lie. And that
the
seems
one
like
thing I've seen people make arguments about that is a straw man argument that makes sense, like straw man arguments seem to,
right,
is sociopaths and psychopaths don't have empathy.
but they do.
But they do. Exactly.
They don't
It's
have-
different.
yeah.
It's different versions of the word empathy.
Yeah, that's just a problem with, like, what does empathy mean in the real world and all the ways it can mean things versus what does empathy mean in Scion. Empathy in Scion means I can understand and interpret other people's behavior. Empathy in the real world might have many shades between I can understand people's behavior enough to manipulate them versus I can understand enough to internalize it as being like myself. And sociopaths have one of those and not the other.
Yes.
But in the Scion system, we're not that shade of gray. And I guess you would say, for the people that want to do this, they would say subterfuge would be the thing that sociopaths use because they don't actually have empathy, and we would say we confine empathy to actually relating to other people.
Yeah.
But actually relating to other people seems to me like a role-playing thing, not a thing that you should define with a stat. You know, somebody could have a lot of empathy and still not really have any connection to other people. Like Sangria is an example of that. Somebody could have very little empathy but still have feeling for their fellow man. So, you know, I don't think that's something you should bind to a stat, really.
Although that makes me remember, when you're talking about empathy kind of being a couple things,
Yes.
I think it's a good system where you can be good at one. Like, melee isn't swords. Melee is all melee with,
All
like,
melee,
even
yeah.
like a table that you pick up and hit people with. Because the more you break an ability down, the more it kind of makes spending XP harder and makes
And it just...
specializing easier, which is worse.
Yeah, it makes... You can specialize, which means when you get to do your specialized thing, it's awesome. But then it really screws you anytime you can't do that. Like, people have asked before, why don't you do marksmanship machine gun, which is different from marksmanship crossbow, which is different from marksmanship handgun, and the reason is because that just screws the marksmanship people. Like, they have a stat they can't use a bunch of the time unless they have their one specialized weapon.
It's why we brought the arts all together.
Yeah, we took out
one of
craft
many
and science.
reasons, but like because it does water it down a little. It makes some questions about things confusing. Like I've used a sword all my life, but I've never trained with a I don't know, Morning Star.
Right.
Why am I amazing in a Morning Star? Well, it doesn't matter. You're a Scion. You have God blood, and that makes that okay.
We pay a little lip service to it by being like, as an unfamiliar weapon, you get -4 this time. And then in the future, it won't be unfamiliar anymore. But honestly, in a game like Scion, where the idea is we want you to be big and epic and be able to pick things up and go bananas because you're a hero of legend, we don't want to encourage the fact that you can't do stuff because you don't have the specialized training. Any more than we want to say if you didn't have steel training as a mortal, you can't have combat stats. Like, that's not good for the game. It doesn't help anybody. It just makes it life harder for your characters in the long run.
That did remind me, though, that stealth and larceny should probably be later domain.
Probably. I mean, they have a lot of overlap. Sometimes we go one way, sometimes the other. Stealth you usually use for people hiding from stuff, but larceny would be like hiding things from people, and so it gets weird.
And people end up having to either want to be good at it and take both, or want to have neither and just like, that's just two completely empty stats. They're like, I will never do those because they're almost need it to be both.
Most of the archetypes that do those things need to do both. Like, you can be a character that's just sneaky and can hide really well and doesn't actually bother with stealing things or opening things or hiding things or any of that stuff. But most of the time, like, if you're going to do like your ninja archetype or your spy archetype, they need to have both. So a lot of times it's kind of, it can feel like a stat dump that just kind of XP dumps into two things instead of one. Which
So that's a possible future one.
It's possible.
Is melding those together. We would need to meld two others together to make it even.
And we don't want to reduce it down to there's just 6 stats and that's what you buy.
Although that would reduce it down to just 20, which would be cool. Big fan of round numbers. Big fan of round numbers. But that answered your question a long time ago.
Yeah, sorry, we just sailed right onward.
So, Subterfuge lives within empathy.
Yes. Empathy is a stat that does more than one thing, and that's okay with us.
Yeah.
We think that's a good thing. Because otherwise it wouldn't get used.
If you have empathy, that doesn't mean you need to be an empathetic person.
Yeah.
Necessarily.
And you can roleplay that if you want to. You can be like, I gained a bunch of empathy through fate bonds lately, and I just really care about people more because I understand them more. But you could also say, I understand them more, but I still hate everyone, and that's fine.
That's fine too. Anne and I had while she's working over there, go ahead, I'm filling the space. While she had when Sangria was picking up fate bonds to empathy as a mother figure, we had a big argument about whether or not she actually became
a nice
empathetic
person.
because of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
The answer is no, Sangria never became a nice person. But she'd understand people more, and that had an effect on her.
Yes. So our next question is a simple one. It just says, would art restoration fall under art, craft, or science? And of course, we only use art now. We took craft and science out of the game. But I guess if you were still using all three, which one would we put that under? It's funny that you asked, because we had an art replicator in our original team, Sophia, and she just had an art that did that.
Yeah, I think this is Tom's question.
Oh, yeah? You think so?
I find it difficult that someone else thought about art replication. Like, I feel like they have. Maybe they did, though.
Well, it's art restoration, which isn't necessarily
not art replication.
Right, it'd be like,
or art restoration.
Yeah,
okay, maybe not.
Ancient paintings, that kind of thing.
Well, so the reason we brought the arts together is because so many things needed both the science and a craft to even function, and art restoration is definitely one of them.
Like, all these people, like, it's the same thing we just talked about with larceny and stealth. Like, anybody who does art restoration would have to have all three of those stats, and so it would be kind of just, why am I making you spend XP on 3 different stats? Especially when it's something so specialized that there's
like, I could argue maybe they didn't have art.
Yeah.
Like, if we were using all three, I would say maybe they have the science and the craft part.
Yeah, they have, craft, painting, restoration, and science, whatever form of chemistry involves, like, paint breakdown or restoring limestone, whatever it is you do. But honestly, if we were going to use the all three, we would say use craft and science. But honestly, I'd be inclined to let you do it with just craft because it's silly to make you buy a bunch of different stuff. I could see people wanting art involved because they would say if you didn't have some art, you couldn't restore the art so that it was still of artistic value.
Right, but without the science background,
I mean,
you have no idea. Like, art restoration is so much knowing how to do something so delicately.
I have to use the perfect chemical compounds that won't damage it, and I have to, test everything a million times before I do it. And
a whole lot of different attributes involved as well.
Yeah, so we would say, obviously we would just use art because we just use art for everything, but I would say, my recommendation is don't go bananas. Maybe you do craft and science if you feel like it needs to have 2, but otherwise I would just do craft.
Yeah.
Just go for it. And make sure you have enough academics that you know what you're doing. Alright, why does Hell have medicine?
Hell is the goddess of plagues. She is where all plagues and all diseases come from.
There's a lot of stuff you can look up in
She sleeps in the bed of
disease.
The bed of disease.
Her
servants are like disease 1 and disease 2.
Yeah. And you can look her up in the Edda and read that stuff about how gross that stuff is. And there isn't anything that specifically says, and then Hell releases those diseases into the world. But when she's, it's something that's part of that Viking culture of, you want to die in glorious combat, and then that makes you go to Valhalla. If you don't die in glorious combat, you end up with Hell. And illness is one of the most feared ways for that to happen, because if you get sick and you're living in a primitive society that doesn't have great medicine, and there's a good chance you might just die in your bed, and then you're screwed. You don't get to go to Valhalla, everything's horrible. You go to Underworld with Hell, which is one of the reasons she's strongly associated with disease. Because disease is kind of like Hell being like, no, fuck you, you come with me. And medicine is something we often think of as like the happy doctor stat. You only use it to help people, but you need medicine if you're going to make people sick too. And so that's why Hell has it, because she has that strong plague association. That's why she also has health associated, although she probably only uses the negative half. She has Vow of Pestilence turned on, probably.
I agree. There was a, on this Onyx Path.
Onyx Path.
On the Onyx Path forums, there was recently a question of Hell is not actually an Aesir. She's like one of the weird unclassified ones.
Because she's she's the daughter of Loki, and Loki's not actually an Aesir, he's the blood brother to the Aesir. So she has a lot of giant's blood because she's also Angerboda's daughter, and Loki's half giant. So what is her other quarter? Who knows? I'm making an NPC Scion who is practiced in the art of capoeira. Can I use art dancing instead of Brawl for attacks, or can I combine them in some way?
You can
stunt.
You can combine them in stunting.
Yes, that's stunting. We're not opening the door where we say you can use some other stat for attacks besides the attack stats is like a crazy power game door that no one wants to open. That's a bad idea. And capoeira is in fact a form of fighting that relies heavily on dance moves.
That I am practiced in.
That he has practiced in. He has capoeira pants upstairs, ladies and gentlemen. But
they don't fit anymore.
But the fact that it's a combat style based on dancing doesn't mean that it's just dancing. It's still a combat style. That means you learned Brawl.
Yeah, you have Brawl. That's...
Yeah.
If you learn capoeira, you have a fuck ton of Brawl and at least a little dance. You don't have just a bunch of dance and no Brawl skill.
Right, and you're not going to use dance instead of Brawl because dance is going to be the performance aspect of that, or it's going to be the learning those kinds of dance moves, but it's not going to be the actual hitting people's part because that's what Brawl is for. Yeah,
and so I took 2 years of it, and the beginner training, I came in knowing a lot of martial arts previously though, so the beginner training, watching the other beginners go, it's kind of like just learning dancing. Like you don't actually learn a lot of combat stuff really early on, and then at some point when you or the master, I don't remember the Brazilian name for it, decide you're serious, then you use the dance stuff as like a basis, but it just turns into another martial art. Like it's a martial art that is very acrobatic, but it's a martial art. Like it's all Brawl all the time. With rhythm.
It's the same reason we're not going to let you also punch people with your athletics if you're a ninja. Because...
Right. Yeah.
No, that's not what it's for.
Great comparison.
Yeah. So, no, and I'm sorry to disappoint you. If you want to use your dance for other things, like, I would say if you were going to do like a capoeira exhibition where you weren't going to hit anybody else, maybe you'd use dance instead.
Oh, yeah, some performing dance stuff.
Because that would be a situation where it made sense to do an art instead of actually brawling, because you're not brawling with anybody.
But, as a side note, you could also be a capoeira person and not take any dance.
That's true. You can
because
just get Brawl.
Taking dance means you can also ballroom dance.
Yeah,
ballet
you
dance.
can do Fosse.
Yeah, it opens up whole new doors. That's why it's a completely different stat.
Yeah, so, having just... You can easily be a capoeira fighter who doesn't have any dance, and that just means that your particular style of brawling has a lot of very dance-like moves in it. So, don't... and no, you can never combine two abilities. That's... No. Bad ideas.
I mean, I don't know what combined means in this sentence, but you can't...
I mean, I assume he
you can't attack with those other weird stats.
I assume he wants to roll attribute, ability, and that's not gonna...
No, he wants to roll just the dance. He wants to roll...
Well, both questions were in there.
Oh, okay.
Can I just use dance, or can I combine dance with Brawl? And the answer is no to both of those. But not because we hate you, just because that doesn't make any sense in the system. It's not necessary.
Great, I would give you some sweet relic pants, maybe. That lets you add your
dance?
Your capoeira pants. Because, I mean, really, that's just like legend to...
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing. Like, it's a great place to do something with a relic where you can be like, because I do capoeira, the fact that I'm awesome at art also makes me better at fighting. You get a relic that gives you bonuses because of that. But, but not just by itself. No, that messes the system up a bunch. Don't do that. And that's it for our ability questions.
That's all the ability questions?
All right. Ability questions.
Thanks for the questions, everybody. We'll see you next week, which will be post-Christmas. Gifts?
Right. I put up a couple of posts, but just so you guys know, we've started getting, people are starting to get their Secret Scion gifts, and it's very exciting. A couple of people have already sent me pictures of themselves with their gift, or pictures of just the gift, and I'm going to go ahead and post those on Christmas Day. So if you get yours in the next couple of days, send us an email with a picture of it, so we can also celebrate. And then, if you don't want your face in it, just don't put your face in it.
If you haven't sent yours yet, or you sent yours very recently, when was the deadline?
They were supposed to send it a week ago Friday.
Okay, a week ago Friday. So if for some reason you hadn't sent it by then, let the person know that it might be coming a little late, or let us know.
Let us know. We'll let them know because it's a secret.
Yeah, because we don't want people to be sad, think they got left out. Once Christmas hits, we're gonna do a re-gifting type thing to we're gonna make sure that the people that got left out get nice gifts.
Right. So if you ended up for some reason you couldn't send your gift and you don't think you're going to be able to, let us know and we will take care of it.
We'll handle it. Hopefully it's not a system that is abused.
Yeah, please don't make us send out 25 presents, but we will we will take care of it to make sure nobody gets left out.
Yeah, but we need to know that as soon as possible. So, but if we will know by Christmas if somebody didn't get it, they will probably tell us. If you can beat us to that so that we can say, "Oh, it's just late." that would be preferable.
Yeah, and I know for a few of you that are in foreign countries that are far away across an ocean, it's been slow. So that's just the mail. Hopefully you'll get it in a couple of days. I know a couple of people have told me, hey, I sent something out to somebody, but I haven't heard.
Now there was a time